Hello, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to How to Avoid Jaw-Droppingly Bad Adjacencies to Protect the Brand. Now, I thought that was going to be the longest title on the board until I got here, and I saw titles that were even longer, so I don't feel so bad now. But I am your host, Gary Burtka. Thank you, Katie, for that great introduction. As she mentioned, I'm the VP of Operations for RTB House. We are a global personalization company. We specialize in retargeting, but are quickly working to use deep learning to grow and do a number of other really interesting personalization tactics. We do have over 1,500 customers throughout over 70 countries globally, so we're very excited to be bringing our service here to the US now for the last 2 years. I am joined today by Leanne Skipper. Now Leanne, as Katie mentioned, has a great background in marketing and e-commerce. Leanne also has been at many fantastic sites throughout companies throughout the years, including Sears, United Airlines, and Expedia. So she's got a great background. She's going to be sharing a little bit about affiliate marketing and how to protect your brand there in that space a little bit later. We're also going to be covering some traditional online display topics, as well as diving into programmatic and how we can protect your brand in the programmatic space. There we go. All right, now quick question here. I know a lot of you are wondering what a programmatic guy is doing here talking about brand safety, right? And so just in lieu of full transparency, I haven't always been on the vendor side. I actually have a background working for clients, agencies, brands, and now the last few years, some ad tech companies. So like Leanne, I've worked for one of the Sears organizations, spent a number of years at Land's End. That was actually where I started working with a lot of different display ads and actually came in touch with some of the first brand safety issues. A few years later, I found myself at Brad's Deals testing hundreds of networks and starting to run into this brand safety issue daily. So just wondering from a show of hands if any of this has ever happened to you, right? Has anybody ever woken up one day coming to work, maybe found a bad placement, or even worse, found that placement trending somewhere in social media? Right? So if we have a premier food brand or maybe a gourmet product, a food product, you wouldn't want to be associated next to vomiting blood or food poisoning. That would be really detrimental, right? Worse than being, a little detrimental, it could go viral, like we said. Looking at your a retail side, right? If you have a shoe company, you're selling shoes, you would not want to have that next to an article, even if it's satiristic in nature. You wouldn't want to have it next to running away from school, shootings, fleeings. These things aren't really funny for us, and it's not funny for brand managers. In fact, I have hundreds, if not thousands, of screenshots like this that I've collected over the last 5-6 years. And it ranges from everything from some of it's funny, right, and some of it's ironic. Other shots are very detrimental to the brands, and this can leave marketing teams, either on the PR team or the digital team, in a lot of pain trying to solve these problems. We have body shaming and model ads as a recent trend over the last year that has become very difficult for retail companies to really try to manage around. And obviously, the niche sub-themes as brands and service providers, you have to think about these niche sub-themes. So, from a cruise perspective, you probably shouldn't be advertising next to a sinking cruise ship. You don't want your athletic apparel next to a potentially really negative article on an athlete that is being accused of domestic violence. So these are really bad aligned brand associations that you can ultimately, usually avoid. But in many instances, brands are not able to or haven't been able to thus far. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Okay. The green arrow is not working, the red arrow goes backwards. Oh, okay, sorry about that. So, you aren't the only ones, right? If you're having brand problems, you're not the only one. In fact, 67% of respondents in a recent Gum survey stated that they've had at least one infraction of a brand safety issue. All right? So it's not great out there. And in fact, it's not easy to just click a filter and have it go away, right? There's no filtering out of this anymore. It's very broad and vast. So the topics range from violence to hate crimes to hear fake news, tragedy, and politics. And with an election coming up in less than a year, right, it's even more important that we think about how to lock down our brand safety for tomorrow. The offenders should be no surprise to anyone here. In fact, I bet many of you actively go to some of these sites regularly, if not every day, if not multiple times a day. Where they're clicking, engaging, sharing, reading, liking ourselves, right? We are influencing other people with what we share, and as marketers, we need to be understanding of the impact that we can have to the brand we represent with the campaigns that we put out there. So we can't just think through the context of a social media user, we also need to think through the context of a social media influencer when we're managing campaigns. And I always like to try to tell people, you know, when you're out there influencing, you're creating campaigns, you need to avoid the giants. Now this was a trend that came up, probably about 5-6 years ago, and it's still active and alive today. There are large activist groups that are looking to penalize brands, whether they're purposefully or not purposefully advertising in the wrong places against the wrong content. Groups like Sleeping Giants here have a huge following on social media, Twitter and Facebook and other places. They've been able to single-handedly impact the revenue of publishers and made brands and ad networks take note and make sure that they are being more brand safe. And this is a trend. And I think personally, my prediction going into next year is that you're going to see more activist groups, not just focusing on publishers, but starting to broaden the focus of what they're looking at and starting to look at influencers too. Because what's happening is influencers are now starting to create, like news networks, they're starting to create more and more content that is getting a little more close to that edgy or cautious area where you don't want to be as a brand. And as they do that and they're growing and trying to gather their own engagement, they're not building the tools for brands to be safe in those environments. So how can you make your campaign safer? Is it possible? Ultimately, I would like to say, yeah, you know, all you have to do is avoid the negative content. But it's not that easy, right? You actually have a whole laundry list of areas that you need to avoid. Things like politics, social values, religion, anything related to sex, anything related to violence, and those sub-themes we talk about. You need to think about the sub-themes for your independent brand and the customers that you have. And you can't just think about the entire group of your best performing products, because that only reaches a subset of your customers. You have to think about all your products and services and how it relates to those users in order to avoid the negative impact. Now, I want to shift gears and focus on one of the channels, traditional online display. And this was how I started in the display space after being a search marketer myself. And, you know, thinking about how to talk about display, I started thinking about the Dove Transformation ad campaign from, I think it was about 2 years ago when it launched. And that ad campaign, it actually created national headlines, right? And it wasn't good headlines. It was because people felt that they were not true to their identity. They were not diversified enough, and they were not inclusive enough with their message, right? And so it's important to note that the message that came from that campaign wasn't completely negative, right? That campaign itself was negative, but what happened is brands took note. Big companies took note and action happened. Big brands like Macy's and JCPenney and Sears went out and they actually started building diversity teams, right? Hiring people that focused on diversity and inclusion. Sometimes they hired agencies, sometimes those teams hired agencies. The agencies brought in knowledge and they looked at the content in the campaigns. They looked at the content being put online and they educated executives in those organizations so that they would understand not only emerging trends, but the optics of some of their existing campaigns and how to better look at this. And so a couple things that I wanted to leave you here with today is knowing that every company can't afford an agency or a diversity and inclusion team, right? Because some of us are smaller companies. How can you work around that? Well, one is empower your own teams. Try to put together a committee of people to look at your content before it goes online, before it's shared socially. Look at your national advertising campaigns, the ads, the assets that are created before they get live to the audience, before your customers see it. Get ahead of this, right? And I totally understand if you have even a smaller company and you don't have enough people to do this. Or if you're afraid that people in your company just might not have that width or optics that you need in order for you to succeed. Empower your customer in this case. Your customers would love to be a part of this. They would love to understand and provide feedback on the messages they get. And I'm an ultimate believer in including your customer in this kind of feedback loop. It will only strengthen your relationship with them and provide a value in social media. Whereas if you don't include your customers and you don't ask your employees, right, and you put a campaign out there, it can really damage your brand. It can make it very difficult for you to rebound from. It's also about publisher selection, and I know you're going to talk a little bit about this in the affiliate, so I don't want to go too much into this. But just like in the other spaces, you want to align your publishers to your clients, right? You want to have the right message on the right spaces where they're at. I can't tell you how many times I go to a website and I see content that really isn't meaningful to me, and it's a full page takeover or something very brand oriented, but it doesn't match. And so with publisher selection obviously comes segmentation, right? And the segmentation is vast. The message I want to drive home today is don't be afraid to use more data or to pay for even more opportunities to further segment your users. By using behavioral, location-based data, by using demographic and interest-based data, again, you can narrow the message and narrow the target audience down so you can be more relevant to them. Your campaigns will only improve with the more data that you can put into that. Now this is a fun one I wanted to bring up, and it's not fun for me. I'm neither a bird watcher or a hunter, but this is something that actually came up years ago when I was in the affiliate side of the business, and I thought this is a good segue to Leanne. And this is really on how one of my former partners actually found a way to avoid cross-contaminating their audiences. You see, this retailer actually sold binoculars, high-end binoculars. And half of their audience, essentially half the revenue came from hunters, and another half of their audience, the revenue came from watchers. And so you can understand how in social media, in marketing, advertising, even in emails, how you couldn't cross-contaminate that message, right? It would be very detrimental to that brand. So they actually launched 2 separate brands to fully focus on those users. And what they got was a successful business model that had no cross-contamination. So that was really exciting to me. It was a unique way that I thought they approached it, and I never thought I would be able to use it in a presentation, but here we are today, talking about segmentation, and I thought this was an ultimate example of segmenting within the affiliate space that I saw. Leanne. Very obvious one.
Right. Thank you, Gary. I also do really appreciate you bringing that home for everybody to understand how I'm going to loop affiliate marketing into how you can keep your brand safe. I actually wondered myself how I was going to do that in this presentation, and I thought, well, how have I been successful? So after nearly 2 decades of experience, what have I gained through those years that I want to share with you? How can I make you more successful in what you're doing? And I looked back and I thought, okay, well, I have managed high-end catalogers' mailing lists, yes, 20 years ago, back in the day. I have managed Q4 digital campaigns so that it's on the ground running rapidly as fast as you can while at Sears. And now I'm managing affiliate programs for 2 different brands with 2 different target audiences. And what is the one thing that all of this has had in common? And it's the people that I work with. It's the partnerships that I have. It's the relationships that I've developed. Because as you continue to do that, you realize that as you grow those partnerships, you start to understand the business models that they're under, and you start to understand that they're going to represent, and you trust that they're going to represent your brand the same way that you would. The people that I've worked with are anything from freelance copywriters to agency contacts to now my affiliate publishers. Those relationships are friendships. We trust each other. We believe in each other. We empower each other. And part of that is knowing that when I reach out to them and I need something, they're going to help me. And I do as much for them as I can. I give them good information. I give them good promotions. I give them on-time information. And that allows them to be supportive of me when I need something. So again, we're all in this together. And I think ultimately when you realize that those relationships aren't just, it's not just a point of contact, it really is truly a relationship, it will help you grow and build your brand. So some of the ways that I think it's important for you to look at your affiliate program if you have one, or if you're interested in having one and you don't today, one of the things is to hand select your partners. Get to know who they are. Look at their website. Look at the placements that they have on their site. Who are they promoting? Make sure that you're partnering with people that you can trust. They're the publishers, bloggers, influencers within your industry. How would you know this? You listen to your peers. You attend network events. You attend events to understand who are up-and-comers, who are winning awards, why are they winning awards, who are they collaborating with, what are they doing. Introduce yourself. If you haven't met anybody, introduce yourself. Offer a handshake. Ask them where they're from. That's the best way to get to know somebody, because if you can't do that when you're face-to-face with them, it's going to be really difficult to do that through email. Customize your affiliate sign-up forms so that you have the ability to filter out low-quality applicants without ever having to, review those on your own. We don't have time for that. The networks have built wonderful ways for you to say, I want to work with people within this country, people that do this within certain categories. Ensure that your partners are inclusive and not offensive. Take a look at what they're doing. Make sure that what they have on their site represents what you want your brand to say, and vice versa. If they're already promoting things that you find offensive, you should assume that they will likely promote your brand next to something offensive. It's already there. You've already seen it. Just make sure that you're familiar with who these partners are. The great debate. Toolbar partners. Either you can or you cannot work with them. It's a really very sticky widget right now in this space. I say look at what you would be losing if you didn't work with them, but then also look at what your other partners are losing when you do work with them. And to make sure that if you're using a toolbar or an extension, are those customers aware that they're using it? Are they opting in to use it? That's definitely something that I like to make sure, is that the customer is aware that they're using this and that it's something that they want as their shopping behavior, because that's something that we should support. Everybody shops differently. We all are busy. We want conveniences. If that toolbar is important to them, I want to make sure my brand is available to them. So just, again, understand your audience and look at your program and see what it would impact. Avoid, as I mentioned, the automatic software installation partners. Publish and inform your terms and conditions. Make sure they're up to date. I don't know how many times I've had to refer to my terms and conditions when somebody's doing something they shouldn't be doing. It's your backbone. It's like having your receipt at a retail store. It has proof that you've done something and that you've told these people not to do it. Make sure it has things in there that are non-commissionable. Make sure it has things about your brand, like that they cannot bid on your brand name or bid on your TM Plus. And then lastly on this slide, I think it's important to mention that as you're recruiting, that not a lot of affiliates, like if you have a large group of affiliates in your program, it's not necessarily, more is not always better. It's the 80-20 rule. 80% of your revenue will come from 20% of your partners. And when you start to look at your program and you have a large number of partners that are inactive or not click active, and you look at that percentage and you report that percentage up to leadership, leadership says, well, your program is very low in your sales and click activity. Why is that? You're like, well, because I have 15,000 publishers and only 100 of them are sales and click active, because again, it's the 80-20 rule. So something to consider when you're recruiting. Another thing is communication. So obviously, as you're working with these partners, it's important to remember that the way you support your brand and the way you speak of it is what they're going to pick up on from when they're talking to you. So I always think you need to be your own brand ambassador. Brand ambassador is something that is a buzzword right now, so I thought it was really relevant to this conversation, that you want to make sure you are giving them all of the information they need to be successful. So if that's creative assets, you deliver them on time. You make sure that everything is appropriate. You want to make sure that if they create creative for you, you've signed off on it. Make sure they know of any exceptions. Make sure they know of all of the exclusions that that promotion has. The more you communicate with them, the more they're going to trust your rapport, and that will go likewise when you need something for them. Be clear about anything that is off the table. I mean, this is pretty obvious, but numbers of times people will come back and you're trying to have a conversation about something and it was clearly laid out for them. Monitor and maintain the most active affiliates. Again, I mentioned it's the 80-20 rule. Another thing about this is with your active affiliates is it will make your job easier in being able to follow your placements. So if you have a large amount of placements within your program, you want to make sure they're happening when they're supposed to. You want to make sure that they're not offensive to the brand. And by having a fewer number of active affiliates that are really supporting your brand, you know who to be able to reach out to. I'll share an example from when I was at Sears. We ran a lawn and lawnmower spring cleanup campaign with lawnmowers, and there was a blizzard across most of the country that weekend. The valued partnerships, those people that I continue to tell you, like we build that rapport, those are the people that you can reach out to and you can say, oh my gosh, the whole country is having a blizzard and I am running lawnmower deals. So I need you to switch this out for me. Some partners will do that and some won't, but the partners that you've built this relationship for will definitely work with you on that, and you can make it easier on them by doing evergreen ads that are always loaded to the network. It's definitely something that will help protect your brand because they're not going to put somebody else up. I mean, that would be terrible. Like, you know, oh, well, we're going to pull yours and then we'll start promoting somebody else that's not promoting lawnmowers or spring cleanup. So you just want to make sure that you're giving them all of the options to still be successful, because you're basically asking them to make a change on your behalf and you don't want them to be inconvenienced. So one of the things I've learned is definitely make sure that you're making it easy by offering them either an evergreen ad or switch it out to a logo. We had done that when I was at United. If a fair sale or a route launch was no longer a desirable location because of some sort of weather or tragic event took place, we would just quickly have it swapped out to the brand logo. So as long as they know that direction, when you ask them to do something on your behalf, again, it's easier for them to do that. And of course, keep an eye on the context of your placements. One of the things that can happen that you can never quite expect is when you are on somebody's site and they have a user forum and all of a sudden the users start messaging about your brand. Those are the things that as you recruit and you start looking at places to have placements, just beware of that risk, because that's opening yourself up and your placement up for a lot of negative, brand safety. So it's just opening you up to a can of worms and potentially very negative press. And you want to be able to go back to leadership and report, that you've had a strong conversion and strong return on ad spend, which again is why I feel like you have to make sure that you're monitoring your own campaigns, trusting your partners with your brand, and making sure that together you guys are working on this partnership, because again, they're successful because I'm successful and vice versa, and you're in it together. And I think that's why after nearly 2 decades of doing this, I think that's one of the things that I continue to take with me is all those partnerships and relationships that I have, because no matter if I'm doing affiliate marketing or something else, it's just that much easier for me to continue to protect the brands that I work for and make sure that what I'm doing is in the best place it can be. So I will let Gary continue with his presentation.
Thank you, Leanne. I think a lot of what she had to say there about relationships is very portable across many of our marketing channels and partnerships. Good stuff. I want to talk a little bit now about making programmatic display a little less problematic. It's kind of a joke I share with one of my friends on the retail side who asked why I went to the vendor side. I said, I'm trying to make programmatic less problematic. And it all starts with good segmentation. I like to say a good quality campaign starts with segmentation. And right here's an example of some of the segmentation opportunities out there for a good programmatic partner. This isn't necessarily the mix, right? This is, again, an example. We can actually look at users that haven't been to the site from 30 days up to 2 years back, message them uniquely. But you don't only have to think about dormant users. You can think about how to treat your most active users differently. You can think about how to treat your loyalty users differently. You can message them, sequence them with different messages. If you're selling appliances or high-ticket items, you can message them 6 months out or 9 months out with different service offerings or cross-sell, upsell opportunities for those. So there's a lot of ways that you can think about how to strategically message users with different messaging within programmatic. This is the value of programmatic. A lot of people get hung up on the brand safety and the negatives of it. But you also have to think positively, where you can use programmatic to instill brand lift, equity value, by having a better experience, offering a better, more unified experience for those customers. Right? Now again, we've talked a little bit about the strategy of a good programmatic campaign. Let's make sure it's brand safe. And we always like to start with a good blacklist. And blacklists can range anywhere from some clients, 1 dozen or 2 dozen URLs, domains, all the way up to 60,000 domains we have some clients using. And it's really important to manage your blacklisting expectations and ensure that you're not over blacklisting. Because if you blacklist too much, you're going to impact the performance of your campaign. right? Because when you blacklist a domain, you blacklist the domain in its entirety. You're blacklisting the bad stuff and the good stuff too. So before I ever blacklist any domain, whether it's for a client or for North America, I'm always going to do a lot of due diligence on that domain to ensure that it has almost all bad content. If it's not all bad content, I don't want to blacklist the domain. I'd actually like to default to what my best, or my new best practice is, which is using a hybrid of a blacklist as well as a negative keyword list. Now, I know a lot of folks may not be familiar with keyword blocking in programmatic. This is actually a relatively new technology that we developed last August. So it's been on the market almost a year, but it isn't obviously being shouted from the rooftops. But at our RTB house, because of this need at the keyword level, at the page level, to get into the content and to ensure brand safety, we used our natural language processing and deep learning to actually go at the page level to block keywords within content, within titles, within any metadata, essentially that's first-party data. So it could even be your comments if it's a first-party comment system. And this allows you to avoid a lot of those instances previously unavoidable. Now, whitelisting is a tactic that a lot of marketers used to talk about, years ago. I actually don't see whitelisting very common anymore. I believe that's because most of the campaigns that I, as a marketer, launched and whitelisted never really had the reach and never really reached the expectations of scale and performance that we had as marketers. And I think that, combined with the new tools that have been developed to prevent ad fraud and to prevent bad ad placements, have combined to help us marketers focus not on the practice of whitelisting, but on the better skill of creating negative keyword lists and better blacklists. Now, another thing I want to mention in brand safety that's very important is the filtering, right? So using SSP, your SSP filters, your category filters, and also using Google Safe, the Google safety feature within the display advertising to ensure that you're reaching only the best users. These are some of the fundamental pillars of our brand safety tool, but obviously it wasn't enough, which is why we had to use natural language processing to further develop the keyword abilities it has. Now, one other thing I want to talk to you about today is too many ads. How many of you have had this experience? You've seen way too many ads on one page. All right, I see a lot of hands on this one. Historically, agencies and brands have tried to solve this through frequency capping. And I'm here to tell you, as a former heavy display purchaser myself, frequency capping isn't the way around this. If you frequency cap down to 18, someone could still have that experience 2 or 3 times, and that's the only experience they have with their brand. Even worse, I just paid for those 18 impressions, and I didn't get to impression number 34 where they likely would have converted, right? So I got them a bad brand experience, I don't convert them, that was a lose-lose for me. And this has really been the only solution, again, up till recently. Last year we rolled out a tool called Smart Capping. Smart Capping actually utilizes, again, the deep learning processing and also our deep learning algorithms to really understand and project the potential click-through rate of each ad unit on a publisher. So this allows us to focus only on those top projected click-through rate ad units that you want to advertise on, limiting the too many ads on one page issue. Now I say we developed this, we haven't used it too much because naturally the deep learning algorithm, it actually creates 1/3 of the impression frequency of some of the other companies I've tested and worked with. But again, knowing that there's a need out there, we wanted to solve that need and see how sophisticated, or ideally how efficient the platform could be and how sophisticated we could make those requests. Now, I don't want to leave here without telling you, hey, if you're not working with RTB House, don't fret, right? There's a lot of solutions out there you can plug in some brand safety tools with. I've worked with all of these in my past when I was on the client side and also on other vendors, and they've all provided more benefit than not having them. I've never tested them head-to-head, so I'm not here to recommend any one of them, but I definitely recommend, if you don't have brand safety solution in place, you definitely want to reach out to one of these folks and offer you a few tools. If you have concerns about your own programmatic campaign, go home, use a few of the tools that we use on these sites, add some products to your cart, abandon that cart, and go to some of these sites. You're going to quickly see whether or not you're having a programmatic or brand issue yourself. And if you don't think that you're able to really do a good audit for yourself, be sure to stop on by booth 1762. We're here this weekend doing complimentary audits to customers and prospects that are in need of a deep dive. So come on by, say hi, happy to talk more brand safety with you. Apologies, we're out of time. But we do also have a fantastic event tonight. We have a few VIP tickets left. So if anybody is available, wants to go on a fireworks dinner cruise with us, come catch up with me in the back. Thank you all for your time. Enjoy the rest of the show.